You want to quit playing?
I want to know if it's the. I'm trying to find out what's going on.
Why you playing? Because you're a player.
For me, now I
Playboy.
got too many. I got too many freaking kids
So
playing
at
around. I
the
ain't gonna
at the
lie.
at the at the end of the day, you feeling a certain way about me saying something that you believe.
I got more to it, but you want me to get to that?
But I mean, why we got to build up all this shit around it?
No,
Like,
you
let's
had
just get to the nitty gritty, right?
All right, forget that. You spam my
Let's get to
comments.
the nitty gritty.
You spam my
You
comments.
you feel a certain way about me about saying something that you believe because you're a rapper and you believe the same fucking thing I do.
No, you said that it's 50
So what's
people.
the difference?
What? How do you find? You finding 50
I said
other
it was,
people?
nigga. I said it was hundreds,
Hundreds,
and
my bad.
I'll name them,
Hundreds.
and we can list them, right?
Okay, but do you have to say?
We can start from Rosenberg Raw all the way to motherfucking Blue.
Okay, just to kind of make it clear, it is Lupe Fiasco's opinion that there are hundreds of rappers walking the planet today who don't even have a record deal and I guess are better than Kendrick Lamar.
How many battle rappers are there?
Freaking, I want to say it's a lot. It's thousand.
So the bottom tier of the thousands of battle rappers, you can arguably say would be rapper wise better than say a mid-tier mainstream artist.
Yes, rapping wise, yes.
So when I say that there's hundreds
of only rappers.
Yes, that are better than me.
You didn't, but hold on, you're not going that far. You're not going that far.
Better than Dot, better than Jay-Z.
No, we gotta stop.
Better than King Los. Better than maybe not better than Ab-Soul. Better than all of the mainstream niggas you can find.
Lupe, we gotta stop.
Stop.
What do I even say to this? I mean, I've given Kendrick lots of positive reviews and coverage over the years. And, you know, I've been also out of step with what I think the popular opinion on Kendrick is. A lot of people seem to really love his Damn album. I think that's honestly like one of his worst aging albums. A lot of people seem to have thought that his new GNX record was trash and, you know, severely sort of like underneath his usual level of quality. I think it's one of his coolest projects. So, you know, there have been times when I've definitely been out of step with what, you know, a lot of people think about Kendrick and the quality of his art. But the idea that there are just hundreds of dudes, you just walk down the street and spit and hit one who's better than Kendrick Lamar? I don't know. I feel like it kind of betrays the reality of our ears. It sort of like presumes that anybody who puts maybe 1 to 2 years of focused effort into learning how to rap can basically do what Kendrick does with little to no effort. And we know that that's not true because there are loads of dudes who have put in way more years than that when it comes to rapping and when it comes to writing rap songs, and they're still not writing songs that are as compelling as Kendrick's or as lyrically interesting. This is why it's so crazy that AI music is still a thing when there's so many artists out there who deserve recognition before slop. No, it's true. And the slop persists because your average person is not really that discerning, and that's honestly the problem. Off topic slightly, but do you think Billy Woods is better lyrically than Kendrick? That's a good question, and something that I think we will get into in a second as I'm, you know, sort of like looking at some of the stuff that Lupe has said over here.
I find it crazy that you can't even say that you think that you are a better rapper than Kendrick Lamar. I'm not talking about albums. I'm not talking about making songs. I'm not talking about being an artist. All things that I've said all these years. He's a better artist than me. He makes better albums. He has a better team. He has better beat selection. He has better production, right? He has all of these better things, right? When it comes down to lyricism, when it comes down to these lyrics and putting these bars for bar for bar for bar, no. Everything else, for sure.
I feel like this is such like cope. I feel like Lupe needs to sort of make sense of the fact that for a moment he was like the conscious rapper du jour. He was making great records and he was making commercial headway. I will sort of say like being categorized and being sort of to a degree maligned as a backpack rapper, as somebody who was like in college during this time when backpack rap was like a regularly used term, an unironically used term, and listened to a lot of rappers who were considered backpack rappers. People used to clown on some of my favorites like Mos Def and Talib Kweli and, all these underground dudes. And, the Black Star record is like, backpack rap and, it's pretentious and it's this and it's that. And people used to even say that like, early Kanye was backpack rap because, he was not quite, I guess like, in line aesthetically with like, what 50 Cent and G Unit and so on and so forth were doing around that era. He was a little more conscious and he wore the polos. Again, it's funny because like the level of popularity that Lupe, sort of had during that time period in the 2000s, a lot of quote unquote underground rappers today would consider to be sort of like just straight mainstream appeal, just like straight mainstream success. But like Lupe's success was only relative to the much bigger artists at the time, like, Jay-Z, who was like, representative of commercial success and, the materialism that turned up in his music as well in a lot of ways. Not quite the, conscious edge that, some backpack rappers were bringing at that time. And I think Lupe sort of like had it almost ingrained in him in a negative way that he was only going to see so much success so long as he continued to stay in this lane. And I think that's how he sort of like landed on an album like Lasers, where he is trying to do this kind of like synthy pop appeal leaning record that's going to try to break him into, the mainstream in a real sort of like commercial sense, when at that same time you have artists like Kendrick and, more underground names from a new generation who are like, no, we're going to keep it kind of like conscious. We're going to keep it alternative. We're going to continue down this road. I think Lupe should have like stuck to that path and should have found a way to sort of like feed into that further rather than sort of like looking for more commercial success in sort of like a traditional way. I say all of this to say, I do think a lot of this comes down to, Kendrick ending up being that dude who sort of like proved that you could be sort of like categorized as a conscious rapper or whatever, but still have massive, widespread commercial success that transcends culture and genre and so on and so forth. And, I think, Lupe's talent is worthy of that same kind of attention and same kind of adoration. But, for whatever reason, it just didn't pan out that way in terms of how, generations and the music industry and musical tastes all kind of like lined up. It's very unfortunate. It's like, I feel like Lupe is kind of left in a space where he has to kind of like respect his own talent, which he has. Lupe is an incredibly talented guy, but he needs some way to sort of like, make sense of the fact that this guy, who is also very talented and very lyrical and puts out content that is super conscious, undeniably, has sort of like, outdone him in a massive way commercially. And the thing is, like, the points at which they both kind of broke into the music industry, there wasn't really that far of a gap between these two moments. We're not talking about like a difference of 20 years here. We're not talking about a guy who forged a certain path 2 decades earlier for Kendrick Lamar to walk down after. Lupe Fiasco's first album came out in 2006. Lupe's debut was fantastic. Tetsuo and Youth is a beloved album that hip hop heads love to death. Drill Music in Zion, I think, is one of my favorite records from him. And even his latest, the whole Samurai record with the Amy Winehouse tie-in, is one of his best albums ever and one of the most celebrated rap records of 2024. I don't know why Lupe has to downplay his ability to craft albums because of the success he's seen Kendrick Lamar's albums have. This is just so difficult to kind of see because these are just like two massively talented guys. And, Lupe has his fan base and he has his, supporters who dive into his records and appreciate what they're all about. Unfortunately, I just think Lupe's lowest point creatively and also lowest point in terms of how he was being treated and maligned in the music industry in 2011, that was a very unfortunate time for him to have kind of like hit the skids in that way. Like, you could argue that with The Way sort of like mixtape culture and the alternative hip hop scene and rap blogs and so on and so forth were taking off, I don't think there could have been a worse point in Lupe's career for that to happen. Like if Lupe came out with a record around 2011, around 2012, that was as good as Food and Liquor. And look, we know around that point he made the Food and Liquor 2 kind of like, you know, mixtape project that was nowhere near as good as Food and Liquor 1. In a lot of ways, he was like still kind of trying to do some of those EDM beats that people dislike so much on Lasers. Like if Lupe came out with a record that was just as good, if not marginally better than Food and Liquor, around 2011, 2012, he could have been just as big in the burgeoning underground scene of that time and sort of like, you know, grown to the size of a Kendrick or a Cole or so on and so forth. But unfortunately, like he had several years where he was just completely off. And then when he finally came out with Tetsuo and Youth, a lot of that stuff was already kind of like in full swing. You know, in terms of like what a lot of people viewed the next generation of conscious rappers to be and to be like, you know, the most relevant of this new kind of like millennial generation of hip hop. Lupe is not just simply like saying like, oh, well, the beats are really good. He just has better beats. You know, he's saying like his albums are better and his songs are better. Like for me, some of these things like kind of overlap in a lot of ways, because if the albums are so good, why are the albums good? Because they have good lyrics and they tell a good story that's compelling. Okay, the songwriting is better. Why is the songwriting so good? Does the song have good lyrics? Good lyrics are kind of central to good songwriting, in my opinion. I don't think people are saying like, oh man, this song is amazing, totally mind-blowing song, but the lyrics fucking suck and are garbage. You know, some of these things like really come hand in hand. I just don't know what Lupe is upset about. He makes great records. He has passionate fans. If he feels like his platform and his success and his fan base and everything needs to be bigger, he has the capacity to make that happen. He can collaborate with other artists. He can make another album. He just dropped an album 2 years ago. That was great. He dropped an album 2 years before that. That was great. He dropped an album several years before that. That was great. I feel like Lupe, in being so bitter against Kendrick Lamar, is kind of like ignoring the fact that honestly, he has a lot to celebrate these days. Because look at it this way. I was talking about a bunch of backpack rappers that, you know, I enjoyed back in the day in college and that I loved. How many of them are still active 20 years later and still putting out records that are just as good as some of the best stuff that defined their career back in the day? You can probably count them on one hand. And one of them is Lupe. There are still people out here, and I would count myself among them, who are still excited to hear new Lupe Fiasco music. He's doing better than Talib Kweli. Most of these dudes who like, you know, used to rap back in the day when Lupe Fiasco was making waves with Food and Liquor are doing podcasts now. Lupe is one of the few dudes who's actually still rapping. Somebody said something earlier about whether or not I consider Billy Woods to be a better, you know, sort of like lyricist than Kendrick Lamar. When it comes to like truly pulling together verses where when I'm listening to them, I really have to like look at the whole way that it's laid out and look at every single reference point and then maybe do research on what the fuck that thing is and then get the background and then see what he says about it and be like, oh, okay, that's what he meant about that. Okay, that's why that reference is there. That's the history of this figure. That's who this guy is. That's who that guy is. Like the only rappers who actually sort of like put me in that mode where I really got to do like fucking homework on almost everything that they're saying are Billy Woods and are A$AP Rock. Most of the time, I wouldn't say with minimal effort, but with like maybe a decent amount of effort, you know, still like I got to focus. I got to pay attention. You know, you really got to lock in. I got to lock in with Kendrick. I got to lock in with Lupe. But like, you know, it's locked in, but I'm still kind of like casually enjoying the music. You know, I'm just like kind of vibing as well on top of it. Like when it comes to getting exactly exactly like what Aesop Rock is saying and what Billy Woods are saying. Like, I got to sit there and read it. Like, I got to read the text, you know? And then once I've done that, I feel like I can really start appreciating or processing the music as well. Lupe needs to start name dropping these incredibly talented rappers. I would love some recommendations. I would love some recommendations from Lupe